You wanted to play in Wimbledon.
Yeah, I would have.
How? Explain that dream.
It would have if I hadn't fallen in love with a buffet. Then the buffet took me on another dream path to rugby.
John Smit never needed to raise his voice to command respect. Throughout one of the most remarkable careers in South African rugby history, his leadership was built on composure rather than emotion. While others became known for fiery speeches or headline-grabbing confrontations, Smit earned the trust of teammates through consistency, discipline, and an ability to stay calm when the pressure was at its highest. That quiet authority helped shape a golden era for the Springboks. More than 100 test appearances years as national captain and the unforgettable triumph at the 2007 Rugby World Cup turned John Smit into one of rugby's most respected leaders. To supporters, he represented stability. To opponents, he represented a team that never stopped competing until the final whistle. But international rugby has never been defined by trophies alone. Behind every championship campaign are rivalries that develop over years of brutal competition. The same opponents appear season after season. The same coaches search for new ways to break your game plan. The same players push every contest to its physical and mental limits. Over time, those repeated battles create relationships that are built not on friendship but on fierce competition and mutual respect. John Smit was never a controversial figure, and he rarely spoke publicly about personal grudges. Yet there were certain names that appeared again and again during the biggest moments of his career. Some stood across the halfway line wearing the colors of England, Australia, or New Zealand. One stood beside him in the Springbok dressing room presenting a very different kind of challenge. None of these men defined John Smit's legacy, but every one of them helped shape it. These are the 5 people whose battles with John Smit became some of the most memorable stories of one of rugby's greatest generations. Number 5. Phil Vickery. When John Smit and Phil Vickery met on a rugby field, there was never any need for dramatic exchanges. Their rivalry spoke through the scrum. Both captains built their reputations in remarkably similar ways. Neither relied on flashy moments to inspire a team. Instead, they led from the front, accepting the hardest work and expecting everyone around them to do the same. That made every meeting between South Africa and England feel like a collision between two of rugby's strongest leaders. The defining chapter came during the 2007 Rugby World Cup final in Paris. England had already surprised many by reaching the final after a difficult tournament, while South Africa entered the match, looking to reclaim the Webb Ellis Cup for the first time since 1995. Much of the attention focused on the battle between the two forward packs, with Smit and Vickery carrying the responsibility of setting the tone. From the opening whistle, neither side gave an inch. Every scrum became a contest for dominance. Every penalty shifted momentum. The match developed into the kind of physical battle both captains expected, where patience mattered just as much as strength. South Africa eventually lifted the trophy, after an outstanding defensive performance and the reliable boot of Percy Montgomery. Yet England's resistance never disappeared, largely because Vickery continued leading by example, despite facing one of the strongest Springbok packs of the professional era. Looking back, Phil Vickery was never remembered as John Smit's enemy. He was remembered as one of the captains who consistently forced South Africa to earn every victory. For Smit, that was enough to make every encounter with England one of the toughest challenges of his career. Number 4. Eddie Jones. Not every rivalry in rugby is decided by the players on the field. Some begin in the coach's box. During John Smit's international career, few coaches caused the Springboks more tactical problems than Eddie Jones. First with Australia, and later with England, Jones built a reputation as one of rugby's sharpest strategists, a coach who believed that the smallest detail could change the outcome of a test match. That approach repeatedly challenged South Africa. Throughout the Tri-Nations years, Australia often lacked the physical size of the Springboks. Instead of trying to match them at their own game, Jones focused on speed, discipline, and intelligent game management. His teams regularly forced South Africa into uncomfortable situations, turning matches into contests of patience rather than power. Jones also understood the importance of pressure before kickoff. His media appearances frequently drew attention not because they were controversial, but because they subtly shifted expectations onto the opposition. While other coaches stayed quiet, Jones was often willing to play the psychological game long before the first whistle. John Smit rarely responded in public. Instead, the Springboks focused on answering those challenges where it mattered most on the field. Over the years, the rivalry developed into much more than South Africa against Australia. It became a contest between one of rugby's calmest captains and one of its most inventive coaches. Even after Smit's playing career ended, Eddie Jones remained one of the figures most closely linked to some of the Springboks' toughest tactical battles. For that reason, his place on this list was never about personal dislike. It was about the constant challenge he presented every time his name appeared on the opposite team sheet. Number 3. Richie McCaw. If one player came to symbolize John Smit's greatest rivalry, it was Richie McCaw. During the 2000s, every meeting between South Africa and New Zealand carried enormous significance. The Springboks and the All Blacks were competing for more than trophies. They were competing for the title of the world's best rugby nation, and at the heart of that rivalry stood two captains who led by example rather than by words. Smit and McCaw shared many qualities. Both remained calm under pressure. Both demanded high standards from their teammates. Both earned respect across the rugby world. Yet every time they faced one another, the contest became intensely physical. Much of the attention focused on McCaw's work at the breakdown. His ability to slow possession and win crucial turnovers frustrated opponents for years. Some admired his remarkable understanding of the laws. Others believed he consistently pushed those laws to the limit. South Africa experienced that frustration more than most. Again and again, McCaw found ways to influence the biggest matches, often producing decisive moments when New Zealand needed them most. Whether it was a turnover, a tackle, or simply disrupting the Springboks' rhythm, his presence could change the direction of a game. There was never any public hostility between the two captains. Instead, their rivalry was built on repeated battles played at the highest level of international rugby. Looking back, it is difficult to tell the story of John Smit's career without also telling the story of Richie McCaw. For nearly a decade, they stood on opposite sides of rugby's greatest rivalry, each determined to lead his country to victory. Few opponents demanded more from John Smit than the legendary All Blacks captain. Number 2. Graham Henry. Behind many of New Zealand's greatest victories during John Smit's career stood one man. Graham Henry. While players earned the headlines, Henry quietly built one of the most successful teams rugby had ever seen. His attention to detail, tactical discipline, and long-term planning transformed the All Blacks into a side that rarely gave opponents a second chance. For South Africa, that presented a constant challenge. Whenever the Springboks prepared to face New Zealand, they were not simply preparing for outstanding players. They were facing a system that had been refined through meticulous coaching. Every phase of play appeared carefully rehearsed, and every mistake made by the opposition seemed to be punished immediately. The contrast between the two nations became one of the defining stories of the late 2000s. John Smit led a Springbok side built on physical dominance and disciplined leadership, while Graham Henry guided an All Blacks team renowned for precision and relentless consistency. Their meetings regularly produced some of the finest test matches in modern rugby. Perhaps the greatest contrast came after the 2007 Rugby World Cup. South Africa celebrated lifting the Webb Ellis Cup under Smit's captaincy, while New Zealand suffered a shocking quarter-final exit. Many believed Henry's time as head coach was over. Instead, he rebuilt. Within a few years, the All Blacks returned stronger than ever, proving that one disappointing tournament would not define an entire generation. That resilience earned admiration throughout the rugby world. For John Smit Graham, Henry represented far more than another opposing coach. He represented the standard every international team was forced to chase. Few coaches challenged the Springboks as consistently or as successfully during one of the most competitive eras in rugby history. Number 1. Bakkies Botha. The final name on this list is the one few supporters would have expected. Unlike the others, Bakkies Botha never wore a different jersey. He wore the same green and gold as John Smit. Together they formed the backbone of one of the greatest Springbok teams of the professional era. Smit provided calm leadership. Botha brought unmatched aggression. It was a partnership that helped South Africa conquer the rugby world. But it also demanded enormous patience. Botha built his reputation as one of the hardest men the sport had ever seen. Every tackle was explosive. Every ruck became a battle. Opponents feared his physicality, but referees watched him just as closely. Throughout his career, suspensions and disciplinary hearings became an unavoidable part of his story. Each incident placed additional pressure on the Springboks, and as Captain Smit was often the one responsible for calming the situation and keeping the team focused. That was the hidden side of leadership. While supporters celebrated Botha's fearless style, Smit carried the responsibility of managing its consequences. Yet there was never any doubt about Botha's value. His partnership with Victor Matfield dominated lineouts across the world, while his uncompromising approach inspired teammates to match his intensity. The same aggression that occasionally created problems was also one of the biggest reasons South Africa became world champions in 2007. Looking back, Bakkies Botha was never John Smit's greatest rival. He was something far more complicated. He was the teammate who demanded the very best from his captain every single week. And perhaps that is the greatest reminder of what leadership truly means. Sometimes the hardest challenge is not defeating the opposition. Sometimes it is leading extraordinary people standing beside you. John Smit's legacy was never built on controversy. It was built on consistency. Throughout more than a decade at the highest level, he led South Africa through one of the most competitive eras rugby had ever seen. Along the way, he encountered world-class captains, brilliant coaches, and teammates whose personalities were every bit as demanding as the opponents they faced. Vickery tested the Springboks in brutal physical contests. Eddie Jones challenged them with tactical innovation. Richie McCaw became the face of rugby's greatest international rivalry. Graham Henry built an All Blacks side that raised the standard for everyone. And Bakkies Botha proved that leadership is sometimes tested most by those wearing the same jersey. Together, these five figures tell a story that goes far beyond wins and losses. They reveal the pressures of captaining a national team, the rivalries that shaped an era, and the challenges that helped transform John Smit into one of the most respected leaders the game has ever known. That is why his name continues to be remembered not simply as a World Cup winning captain, but as one of the defining figures in rugby history.